Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Lore of League of Legends. In this episode, we're going to be doing something unusual for the series. Instead of doing a remastered episode of this particular champion's lore, we're going to be continuing on from where we left off in a second part to the lore of Azir, the Emperor of the Sands. Enjoy. Azir walked the gold-paved Emperor's Way. The immense statues of Shurima's earliest rulers, his ancestors watching his progress. Dawn arrived, and its soft, shadowy light seeped through his city. The brightest of the stars still shone overhead, soon to be snuffed out by the rising sun. The night sky was not as he remembered it. The stars and constellations were misaligned to how he remembered them. With every step he took, Azir's heavy staff struck a lonely note that echoed through the empty streets of the once great capital. The last time he walked this path, an honor guard of 10,000 elite warriors marched in his wake, the cheers of the crowd shaking the city. It was a moment of glory that was stolen from him. Now this was nothing more than a city of ghosts, and he despaired at what had become of his people. With an imperious gesture, the Emperor commanded the sands beside the roadway to rise, creating living statues. This was nothing more than a vision of the past, the echoes of the great city of Shurima given form. The figures of the sand looked forward, their heads tilted toward the immense sun disk hanging above the dais of Ascension ahead. It hung there still, declaring the glory and power of Azir's empire. Yet there were none to bask in its glory. As Azir walked the Emperor's Way, the echoes of sand that were his people pointed up at the sun disk, their joyful expressions turning to horror. They turned to run, stumbling and falling, and their mouths opened wide in silent screams. The Emperor watched in despairing silence, bearing witness to the last moments of his people's history. A wave of unseen energy had obliterated them, reducing them to dust and scattering them to the winds. His mind ran amok with what had gone wrong with his ascension to unleash such a catastrophe on these innocent lives. Azir's focus narrowed, his march more resolute. He reached the base of the stairs of ascension and began to climb. These stairs were sacred, and only his most trusted soldiers, the priesthood, and those of the royal bloodline were allowed to step foot upon them. Sand versions of these most favoured subjects lined his path, faces upturned, grimacing and waiting in silence before they too were swept away by the winds. His stride turned into a run. He took the steps faster than any man could, his talons digging into the stonework and carving furrows where they caught. Finally he reached the top. Here he saw the final circle of onlookers. His closest aides, his advisors, the high priests, his family. The Emperor dropped to his knees, his family before him, rendered in perfection and heartbreaking detail. His wife was heavy with child, his daughter clutching his wife's hand, his son standing tall on the brink of becoming a man himself. In horror, the Emperor saw their expressions change. He knew what was to come, but could not look away. His daughter hid her face in the folds of his wife's dress. His son reached for his sword, shouting in defiance. His wife, her eyes widened with sorrow and despair emanating from them. And in a moment, the unseen event blasted them into nothingness. It was too much, but no tears welled in his eyes. His ascended form rendered that simple act of grief forever lost to him. With a heavy heart he pushed himself to his feet. The only question that remained to him was how his bloodline survived, for it most assuredly had. A final echo of sand awaited before him. The Emperor saw himself in his mortal form rise up into the air beneath the sun disk, his arms wide, his back arched. He remembered this moment, the power coursing through him, infusing his very being with divine strength. A newcomer formed in the sand, his trusted bondsman, the Magus Zerath. The Magus uttered a silent word, and Azir watched himself shatter and explode into motes of sand. The traitor's expression was unknowable, but the Emperor saw nothing but the face of a murderer before him. The image of Zerath rose higher into the air as the sun disk's energy focused into his being, the elite guards rushing towards him. But in an instant, a brutal shockwave of sand flared out, disintegrating the final moment of Shurima, and once more, Azir stood among the dying echoes of his past. He now knew what had killed his people. Azir turned away just as the first rays of the new dawn struck the sun disk overhead. He'd seen enough, and he knew that the traitor still lived. He could sense Zerath's essence in the air that he breathed. The Emperor lifted a hand, and an army of his elite warriors rose from the sands at the base of the Stairs of Ascension. "Zerath," he said, the voice of the Emperor tinged with rage. "Your crimes will not go unpunished." And that's all I've got for you this time around. Let me know what you thought of the video by hitting that like button and leaving your feedback in the comments section below. If you missed it, you can catch the first part of Azir's lore by clicking the annotation at the bottom of the video or the link in the description. If you want to check out the rest of the library, you can do it by hitting the annotation at the top. Thanks for watching everyone, and as always, I'll see you next time.